Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, warriors, wherever you are. I am B. This is the You movement, and I'm out moving. Well, not at the present moment in time, but I was getting my aligned walking on and getting all this light codes coming in, some sunshine, thank God for that, and sitting here grounding some energy. I wanted to talk today a little bit about loneliness, especially on this twin flame situationship, this spiritual awakening, your Kundalini awakening, whatever kind of awakening you are currently going through, because loneliness is built into the equation. I have spoken a lot on multiple videos about how on the twin flame journey or your spiritual awakening, it's like being a caterpillar and going along and going into your cocoon. And you have to, unfortunately, go into your cocoon alone. It's a solo job. And in the cocoon, your life turns to goo, and then you eventually reform anew and are birthed as a brand new butterfly. A wonderful, wonderful way to be. And in this process, that's isolating. It's a period of time where you feel a desire to become very hermit-like. My hermiting began many years prior, actually, to my awakening, from about, I'm going to say, 2015-ish. My life started to get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And a lot of that had to do with, I lost faith. I closed up shop. I had been previously a Reiki Master, owning my own business, as well as having other jobs on the sidelines. And I knew I couldn't keep seeing clients because I was not in my own highest and greatest place. My light was fading, and my love of people was disintegrating. I was feeling very disconnected, very depressed, quite despondent. Of course, I did what every person on this path probably does at some point, and is to think, okay, something's seriously psychologically wrong with me. I'm going to look into what that is, because my life became so small and isolated and disconnected from other people. So I went and got psychological evaluations done. They tried to diagnose me with agoraphobia, which is the fear of leaving your house, which I knew that was wrong, because my favorite place to go each year, even though it was like my only one yearly yoo-hoo happy moment, was to go to a rock festival in Quebec with over 100,000 people. And I was happier than in those days. That was my 3 days of bliss for an entire year. The rest of the year was wah, wah. And so agoraphobia didn't click. I knew I was depressed and taking antidepressants for my depression, and I knew that something was wrong, but I didn't understand it to be, at the time, any form of going into Dark Night of the Soul. I just was lost. I was completely and utterly lost and confused and just coping, apathetically coping, basically in the energy of, well, this is it until I die. This is it. And they wanted to treat me with electroshock therapy, and I was like, hell no to that. And instead, I did cognitive behavioral therapy for a period of time, dialectic behavioral therapy as well. And there were very useful tools and techniques that were taught in that. But as I've said in many videos, at no point were we discussing, one, anything spiritual in nature going on, or two, any form of trauma or abuse that was also going on. So although these counselings were useful in providing some interesting tools, it didn't really illuminate the situation enough to get to the root cause of the problem and dive deep into the abusive marriage that I was in, or my childhood and abuse, or anything on an even broader perspective of spiritually feeling completely and utterly disconnected from source. So I went a number of years where I was not doing Reiki any longer. I had lost faith in anything higher, and I was isolated and alone. So loneliness is pervasive in society at the present moment in time, and a lot of people are struggling with it, especially in this spiritual awakening path. It's exceptionally difficult, especially if you have a lot of trauma from your childhood. So things like abandonment issues, which, yes, adoption at age 2.5 certainly did a doozy on my feeling of connection to people, because a young child needs to have a connection to their primary caregiver for their survival. I'm not a crayfish, so it's not like I'm just created into the world and I go off and do my own thing. I can remember watching a National Geographic once about crabs, I think it was, and as soon as they're born, they have to make their way off the beach and into the water. Yeah, well, I wasn't a crab, I was a human, and I needed to have connection with, and when those connections are cut time and time again, you as a child, learning to be able to trust for your very survival is a pretty tricky thing to do. Feeling a need of connection to others has been something that I have carried with my whole life in a very codependent energy, because there is that fundamental underlying fear of, well, if somebody goes away, then how am I going to survive? And that's child mind coming up to the surface from wounds that occurred well in my first 2 years of life, which I don't have conscious memory of, but my subconscious does, and my body does. The reaction that my body would have had certainly carried those memories with me. While I was on this process for those first initial, 5 or so years of just being depressed, not yet awake yet, not yet hearing from spirit, not yet having that wake-up call of save yourself that came in late 2019, I was very much confused of what's going on and making choices based upon those earlier needs that were underneath my level of consciousness. One thing you may not know about me is before, from the year 2000 to the year 2009, I lived in a foreign country. I lived in Ireland for 10 years, where I raised my son, who was born over there. And I was on my own, basically, for 10 years, living in a foreign country. His dad had left me a couple weeks before I gave birth, and I desperately wanted to try to put that relationship back together, which failed. And I stayed in that country because I had no way to get home at the time. I was told by my mother that you made your bed, now you lie in it. So I was a foreigner living what's known as the term, I was a blow-in, and I would do everything in my power to put on a happy face and go outside and, do all the things, and everything's fine and I'm okay and it's wonderful. But I can tell you, 10 years living in isolation away from your family, your friends, and everything your identity knows was exceptionally difficult for my psyche. And while I know it had some really positive aspects and useful things for me to have 10 years of distance from my mother and focus primarily on raising my son and trying my very best to navigate on my own. Let's just call it as it was. I was on my own for a very long period of time. And even though I tried dating multiple times that didn't ever work, I so desperately wanted partnership. I wanted family. I wanted all those things that I never had as a kid, that safety, that security, that stability. So when I met my now ex-husband, I grabbed hold. I grabbed hold of that in a very codependent mindset, even though I didn't understand it to be that at the time, because I was going to do everything in my human power, everything I could possibly do to make that relationship work, because I didn't want to ever be alone again. I didn't want to be in loneliness again. Loneliness I've carried with me my whole life. And so I squeezed and held on for dear life, even though the relationship almost right away had red flags, and even though it wasn't healthy, and even though there was the ups and downs, the highs, the lows, the constant stresses between these places of, hey, this love bombing energy of this man that just seems so wonderful, and then this other person, this Dr. and Jekyll, Mr. Hyde mental fuckery, and all the gaslighting that I couldn't even see. It's the fundamental underlying root cause to why I stayed. Why do people stay in these relationships? So I've been doing a lot of thinking about that in the last few months. And the why is loneliness. I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want to be lonely ever again. And the devil I knew was offering me a way to fill that void of loneliness. In so doing, it made me more lonely, because being lonely inside of something that's dysfunctional and having a lack of intimacy, a lack of connection, a lack of respect, a lack of showing up for each other in a kind and caring and compassionate way. Instead, I was ripe for the picking. I was an easy target. Here comes this little empath with a lot of abandonment wounds and a fear of loneliness so pervasive that I made the choice to stay. And when it continued on, it got harder and harder to even contemplate leaving or getting out or escaping in any way, shape, or form, because I believed all the mistruths that I had been told, that I was unlovable, I was incapable, I was all these things. That's what my mother had said to me. So she always promoted me to stay in very abusive marriage. I in a weird kind of way, I think she kind of knew it wasn't a good marriage, but it kept me destabilized. So the more destable I was, the easier I was to be a supply for both of them. And that's a difficult pill to swallow, but it is what it is. So now, at the beginning of the year, I did a video called The Pledge. I highly recommend you go watch it if you haven't watched that one, because I made a pledge to myself to be with myself this year, to embrace the dating myself, getting to know myself, loving on myself, caring for myself. And it's been difficult. It's been very, very challenging, because loneliness it's a hard pill to swallow. It's a very difficult one. And some days are better than the others. And some days I'm sitting in an energy where my heart is just clenched, and I'm having memory of all those moments throughout my life of being isolated and alone. And it is not an easy journey. It's not an easy path for those of us that have a lot of these wounds that we have carried with us. That means I want connection. I want connection so bad. And especially on the twin flame journey, which is its own, I don't know. I don't like the word journey, because journey makes it sound like it's fun, unless it's an epic journey like Lord of the Rings or something. And there's been certainly enough orcs coming around from the shadows, making me face my stuff. And that's what the twin flame journey is really all about, is mirroring back to you the shadows. So when you're in an energy of, oh, I miss them, I wish I could see them, this separation stage, as they call it, it is highly triggering. Very highly triggering. And I did a video the other day on emotion work. And part of that emotion work is to see those triggers, especially the triggers that our twins kind of show to us through the 5D, is, sitting in loneliness of, oh, I miss them. Where are they? And then, okay, well, what is it that I'm missing? When has this energy presented to me before? What is it trying to teach me? What am I supposed to learn from this moment of disconnection and isolation? Then you start going through and piecing the puzzle pieces together, where it's like, oh, yes, I remember that loneliness now. That's why I didn't want to be in loneliness again. And, oh, I remember the childhood. Who's my person? Where's my person? And I don't want to be in that energy again. But the only way to transmute these things is to be in that energy again. So whatever it is that we're resisting is what we need to embrace. So today I am embracing isolation. Today I'm embracing loneliness. Today I'm embracing and comforting and soothing and reparenting that little inner girl inside of me that didn't know who she could rely on and had to learn to rely solely on herself. Today I am comforting that, woman, the maiden I call her, that aspect of self that flew off to a foreign country with, notions of magical romance in her eyes that disintegrated very quickly. And I'm comforting these lost aspects of self that have sat in the energy of loneliness. And I've committed with the pledge to stay focused on my own healing and my own care for the rest of this year. It's the year of a relationship with self, and the year continues. We're only in month 3 right now. I'm not going to lie to you and say this is easy work. It's not easy work. It's not easy work facing the what is it in me that is attracting these situations, and what can I do to change them, heal them, and transmute them so that I never have to experience them again. And so if that means for a period of time I need to sit alone by a tree and contemplate, just like Buddha did underneath his Bodhi tree, and contemplate my role in my own suffering, then that's what I have to do. So today's mission that I want to send out to each of you is, what is the energy that you are avoiding? Is it sitting alone? Is it loneliness? Is it isolation? And can you commit to a certain period of time, whether it be a month, a year, where you're going to say, no, I'm going to just stay focused internally on me and allow myself to be in that stage of goo in between being a caterpillar and hanging out with caterpillar folk and re-emerging as a butterfly so that I can find other butterfly folk. I have to say, I wouldn't be surviving this last year if it wasn't for friends, even connections that I have online that have supported me through this journey, because this is hard as hell. If you are alone, just know you're not alone. You got me with you. And if you're feeling alone, then maybe sit in that feeling for a little bit. It's not a pleasant one to sit in, but in sitting in it, we can comfort and soothe ourselves as opposed to repressing it, denying it, and all the rest. So that's the energy I'm in today, is a lot of loneliness, and I'm sending love out to everybody else out there that is feeling the loneliness through this awakening path. And if you're in separation stage of this twin flame journey, which in my personal opinion is a dangerous label to place upon you, because you have no way of knowing whether or not union is coming back to you or not. Listen, I understand very much after being on this journey for a number of years now that the role in which meeting these divine counterparts comes in as a catalyst to wake you up, to show you your shit, to make you heal, to elevate you into a higher level of consciousness, open your heart chakra to a new level of being able to love unconditionally, to love somebody that's not even there. Well, that's unconditional. And I certainly love my twin more than anything. And I love people now in a way that I could never have loved before. because that heart chakra has been completely opened wide, and it allows me to have a capacity of compassion and love for others as I'm going through my own stuff. So the energy today, as I've said, is a lot of loneliness, a lot of longing, a lot of wishing for something. And that's for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. And I think it's very important that anybody who's on this journey, including myself, remembers that the point is to be in the here and now and what is, facing reality for what it is, not daydreaming about what if, maybe tomorrow, maybe down the line. And it's hard to do. Listen, I get that. I understand more than you can possibly imagine how hard it is to let go of the daydream of wishful thinking. But that's not the point of the journey. The point of the journey is not to be sitting in like, oh, one day everything's going to be happily ever after. That's not the point of the journey. The point of the journey is today I'm healing, and I'm healing this. Is be present as much as you possibly can in the here and now, and sitting in whatever energies that come, regardless of how pleasant they are or not. You know, if you're sitting in anger, be angry. If you're sitting in loneliness, then be lonely. It's okay to be lonely and say that I'm feeling lonely today. If you're sitting in grief, if you're sitting in sadness, sorrow, anguish, whatever you're sitting in, just sit in it. Just be in it for today. And let me know what you're sitting in today. And if you need some guidance on that particular emotion, leave a comment below. Thank you so much for all the subscriptions. It means the absolute world to me. That said, peace out, dudes. Oh, and if you want to book a one-on-one Zoom call with me, the way to do that is in the description below. Sending everybody out there all of my love. Let it flow out to you wherever you are, in whatever situation you are, in whatever emotion you are. It's all good.